Hi, I'm Jay Leeming, and this is a special edition of the Crane Bag Podcast, like a purple flower reflected in the eye of a hummingbird. Today we're going to be hearing about the strange and enlightening exploits of Nasruddin the Fool. So there was this fellow named Nasruddin, who was known in his town for doing foolish things. And one evening, some folks walking along a road found him beneath a street lamp, on all fours in the grass. He seemed to be looking for something. "Nasruddin," they said, "have you lost something?" "Yes," he said, "a key." "Where did you lose it?" "Oh, over there, by the river." "Why are you looking here?" "Because the light is much better here," he said. One time, Nasruddin was riding in a boat with a professor of language. After a while, they began to talk. And then Nasruddin mispronounced a word. "What do you know about language?" said the professor. "Oh, not much, I suppose," said Nasruddin. "If you don't know much about language," said the professor, "I'd say you've wasted half your life." After a while, the sea became quite rough, and the wind blew, so that the boat was pitched violently from side to side. "What do you know about swimming?" Nasruddin asked the professor. "Well, actually I can't swim," said the professor. "If you don't know much about swimming," said Nasruddin, "then I'd say you have wasted all of your life." One evening, Nasruddin was walking along a road. When up ahead, he saw men on horseback riding towards him, kicking up a lot of dust. Nasruddin thought to himself, "These men might be thieves, they might be robbers. I have to get out of here." So he jumped over a wall and into a graveyard. Now these men on horseback, they were not thieves or robbers, but simply neighbors of Nasruddin's from his village. And they knew him by the look of him. So they rode to that place near the wall where they'd seen him jump over the side. And they peered down into the graveyard, and they saw him there, hiding out, lying very still. "Nasruddin," they said, "whatever are you doing here?" "I am here because of you," he said. "And you are here because of me." One time Nasruddin happened to come upon a magic wand, and he carried it around with him, and one day he went walking into the countryside. And then he waved that wand, and an entire patent office appeared out of thin air, with desks and people at those desks writing things down, looking at papers. And they turned and looked at him. And Nasruddin said, "I would like to patent this magic wand." And they said, "We don't believe in strange hocus-pocus like that." So Nasruddin waved the wand, and the patent office disappeared. One time Nasruddin decided to take a trip from his small village all the way to the capital city. It was a long journey. But he went, he traveled, he went there, and he came back to his village. And everyone said, "Oh, Nasruddin is back." And they gathered in the town square to hear what he had to say. And Nasruddin said to all the people there, he said, "At this point I can only say this. The emperor spoke to me." And many people, about half the crowd, said, "Wow, the emperor spoke to Nasruddin. That's amazing, that's amazing." And they went home to tell their families this joyous news. But about half the crowd stayed there. And they said, "Well, Nasruddin, what did he say to you? What did the emperor say to you?" And Nasruddin said, "Well, I was standing in a corridor of his palace. And he came walking with a large retinue, many men and women around him, servants, all kinds of people. And they came walking straight for me. And then the emperor barked, 'Get out of my way!' And all the rest of the crowd said, 'Oh boy, that's dumb.' And they went home. But one man remained in the village square with his eyes closed, savoring the moment. And he thought to himself, these are true words. They came from the emperor himself. All this long distance, Nasruddin brought them here, and he spoke them into the air, and I have heard them. And now they are part of me and my life. This is a joyous thing, he thought to himself. And he went home, and he went home, and he talked to his family. And he told them all about it. Once upon a time there was a river that began high up in the mountains, and then came crashing gloriously down through those mountains, until it reached a forest, and then some hills, and then it reached a desert, and it ended in that desert. And always when it reached the hot sands of that place, it would cry out and lament its state, and say, "Oh, if only I could cross this desert. If only I could find a way through this desert and to those mountains I see far on the other side. But always I end here in this hot sand." Now a sand grain heard the lament of the river, and it spoke and said, "O river, you must simply give up what you are. You must simply let go of yourself, and let yourself be carried by the wind up into the air. There you will become a cloud. You will be carried across this desert, and then you will enter those mountains over there. And then, heavy with rain, you will fall down into those mountains, and you will become a river again. People there will call you by a different name, it's true, but you will be a river. You will be much the same as you are now." "How can I know that's true?" said the river. "How can I believe that?" "It's nothing I can convince you of," said the sand grain. "It's nothing you can figure out or plan or find your way to the end of through thought alone. But it is something that you can do." Sometime later, the river let itself be carried up into the air by the wind, and it did become a cloud. And this cloud floated over that desert, and finally it reached those mountains far away. And there, heavy with rain, that river fell down into those mountains and became a river again. Crashing and glorious and laughing it was in those mountains. And there were people in those mountains, travelers, goatherds, shepherds. And one day a shepherd walking beside that river marveled at the glory and beauty of that river flowing through those mountains. And he said, "This river has always been here, and it will always be here." And he said to himself, "This river was here in the past, it will be here in the future. This river will never cease to flow." Well, one evening, Nasruddin was at home, and there was a knock at his door. So he went and opened his door, and there was a friend of his there, and he had brought Nasruddin a duck. So Nasruddin said, "Oh, I'll make duck soup. I've got the best recipe for duck soup." So he made duck soup, and it was very good, and the two of them enjoyed it, and then the man went home. Well, a few days later, Nasruddin was at home, and there was a knock at the door. He went and opened the door, and there was a man there who he didn't know. And Nasruddin said, "Who are you?" And the man said, "I am a friend of your friend who brought you the duck. I heard you made some very good soup. Do you have any left?" And Nasruddin said, "Well, I do actually, so come on in." So he came in, the two of them enjoyed some more of that duck soup, and then the man went home. Well, a few days later, Nasruddin was at home, and there was a knock at the door. And he opened the door, and there was a man there who Nasruddin did not know. And Nasruddin said, "Who are you?" And this man said, "Well, I'm a friend of your friend who brought you the duck. I heard you made some very good soup. Do you have any left?" Nasruddin scratched his head and said, "Well, I got a little bit. Sure, come in. So the man came in. Nasruddin added some water and spices to what he had, and the two of them had a soup together, and then the man went home. Well, this kind of thing went on for some time, in fact, until there came a day, some time later, when Nasruddin was at home, and there was a knock at the door. And he went and opened the door, and there was a man there who he didn't know. And Nasruddin said, "Who are you?" And the man said, "I am a friend of the friend, of the friend of the friend, of the friend of the friend, of the friend of your friend who brought you the duck. Do you have any soup left?" "Oh," said Nasruddin. "Well, come in." So the man came in, and he sat down at the kitchen table, and Nasruddin put before him a bowl of cold water. And the man said, "What is this?" And Nasruddin said, "This is the soup of the soup, of the soup of the soup, of the soup of the soup, of the soup of the soup that I made out of that duck. Bon appetit." Well, one time, Nasruddin went to the big city, and he was dazzled by the experience. When he got there, there were people everywhere. The streets were filled with people. There were people in the alleys, in the shops, in the parks, in the gardens. Everywhere he went, there were more and more people. Well, he was a bit overwhelmed, but he found himself a place to spend the night. It was a cheap place, kind of like a motel. Just a big room with mats on the floor, and you paid a little money to have a mat to yourself. And he laid down on one of those mats. But as he did so, he began thinking. And he thought to himself, there are so many people in this city. When I wake up in the morning, I might not even know who I am. But then he had an idea. He was delighted with this idea. He sat up and he said to himself, and he spoke it aloud. He was so excited by this idea. He said, I will do this. I will take that dry gourd I have with me, and I will tie it to my ankle. And that way, when I wake up in the morning, I will see that gourd there on my ankle, and I will know that I am me. He was very happy with this idea. So he took that gourd and a little piece of dry twine, and he tied that gourd to his ankle. And then he lay down and he went to sleep. But the thing was, there was a man next to him, and he had heard what Nasruddin had said to himself. And this man was something of a joker. So, as soon as Nasruddin was asleep, this man untied the gourd from Nasruddin's leg and tied it onto his own ankle. And then this man closed his eyes and went to sleep. Darkness covered the world. That city slept as all cities do. And when night was finished, the sun rose, the roosters cried on the rooftops, and Nasruddin awoke. As soon as he did so, he looked down at his ankle to check to see if the gourd was there. And to his dismay, the gourd was not there. And what was much more amazing, it was on the ankle of the fellow next to him. Nasruddin was surprised. He looked at his own ankle, no gourd. He looked at the ankle of his neighbor, gourd. No gourd, gourd, no gourd, gourd, no gourd, gourd. And then he panicked, and he grabbed hold of his neighbor, and he shook him awake, and he said, but if you were me, then who am I? Well, one day Nasruddin died. He died and there was a funeral, and then he was buried in the ground. And it's said that anyone who goes to his gravesite will be blessed by the wise, magical foolishness of his life. But the thing is, there's a door to that gravesite, and it's a big, heavy door. It's made of oak. It's at least 3 inches thick, held together with iron nails. And on the right side of this door, there are 4 locks. And on the left side of this door, there are 5 locks. And there are 7 iron deadbolts in this door, and many chains across the front. Now, of course, there's no wall around his gravesite. But there is a door, and it is always kept locked. All right. Well, thanks for listening to this podcast. Here's a few thoughts about what we just heard, what that stuff was. What were those things? Were they jokes? What were they? These are teaching stories in disguise as jokes, I would say. And they're teaching stories from a particular tradition, the Sufi tradition. The Sufis are the mystical branch of Islam. Branch isn't quite right. Some would say they're the center, the core of Islam. Some would say, not everyone. And they believe, and they're mystics, they believe that you can have direct experience of God, of the divine, of Allah, of the big picture. And for them, the way to do that is through ecstatic trance, through song, through dance, through poetry, through chanting. And I love that. I'm a poet and a musician myself, so I'm really inspired by this tradition. These particular stories, the Sufis teach a lot through story, but these stories are about Nasruddin, a fellow known throughout the Middle East, kind of a wise fool, a fool whose foolishness can show us things, can open doors, and teach us things. The Sufis as well have in common with some other traditions, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism, an understanding that the rational mind is not going to get us there. Rational thought, whatever that is not going to get us to a full realization of how things work, the way the world works, a realization of God. So I connect with that. As I said, I'm a poet and a musician, and just in my life, I guess, I've had that experience that rings true to me, specifically through the task of writing poems, for example, because you can't plan your way into a good poem. You can't strategize your way into a poem that is really amazing. You can try, but usually what you write isn't any good. You need inspiration. You need something else to come in there. And if we could invent poem-making machines, we'd have more amazing poetry, perhaps. Any art, I think, is like that. It requires the unconscious. It requires your alignment, the collaboration between you and other forces, whether you call them the muse or God or the earth or whatever. And I think if we look at our lives, a lot of things in life are that way. We don't pick our romantic partners, usually, based on a strategy or a plan. We might try, but it doesn't always work. A lot of the decisions in our lives, the jobs we do, things like that, if we really are honest, I think, and look at them, the rational mind didn't really plan all that necessarily. There was something else going on there. And anyway, that's been my experience in my life. So when these stories emphasize that, I love it. It rings true for me. One example of that is the boat story. There's Nasruddin in the boat with the professor, the guy who knows the rules about how grammar works. And, basically, in the end, the rules aren't enough. Nasruddin can swim in the ocean which could be the divine, the ocean which could be the unconscious, right? In a Jungian kind of way, we'd say that our lives are governed in part by our conscious mind, but also by our unconscious. The dark impulses that we can't see, not dark as in evil necessarily, but dark as in unseen. We don't know they're there. And so we do things we wouldn't have otherwise thought we would do. So whatever you want to call that ocean, the unconscious or the divine, Nasruddin can swim in those waters where the professor cannot. Another Nasruddin story, which is similar to this one, is perhaps the one where he's looking for his key in the light of the lamppost on a dark night. It's a joke, right? It seems like an eternal joke, an always forever joke. The Marx Brothers must have done this joke. It seems like a joke which will outlast many civilizations. It's great. There he is looking for his key in the light of the lamppost, even though he lost his key over there by the river in the dark. Once again, just a little joke. It seems small. It seems like nothing at all. But if you breathe into it, it's great. We look for the answers to things in the places that are easiest. How many times have I done that? Have perhaps you done that? Next time you have a problem, consider that. And again, you can get all symbolic and you can think about it as like awareness, and the light is what we're conscious of. The dark is what we're not conscious of. We look for the answer in the things we already know. which that's very true, I think. It's true for me anyway. And then you can blow it up, expand it. Think about climate change, for example. What's the answer to that problem? Our answer mostly is making more cool machines and doing things with our toys, our technology, because we like doing that. It's satisfying. It's big and shiny. It's what we've been doing all along, and it sounds like it feels good to us, basically. But in fact, that might be just looking in the light. We're looking in what we already know, what we've already done. We're not looking in the dark. If we look in the dark in terms of climate change, we might find some things we don't want to see, some solutions. We might find the key to that problem in some dark places, in thinking about things we don't want to think about. So, I don't know, I'm just throwing that in there. That's one way to think about this story, this joke, and how what it teaches us about solving our problems and about who we are. We're folks who like to do the easy thing, like Nasruddin, and stay in the light. I've heard most of these stories from other people, from the poet Robert Bly, from the poet and translator Coleman Barks, from the English storyteller Ben Haggerty. They were told to me, and I remembered them. If you go looking, you can also find stories about Nasruddin. One place to look is a book called The Sufis by Idris Shah, S-H-A-H. There's a bunch of Nasruddin stories in there. You can also, in Turkey, he's known as the Hoja, H-O-D-J-A, and you can find stories about the Hoja as well, who's pretty much the same character. Some stories are like landscapes, big landscapes that you walk into and explore over time. These stories feel like little stones you can carry around with you, shells perhaps, feathers you can keep in your pocket. And they're small, but as I've said, they're amazing how they open up. And I don't have answers to all of them, but I just love them. That one about him going to the Capitol and coming back, which again is a joke about the emperor just said, get out of the way, But then we got the man who listens at the end, and it's like, is that a true gift, those words of the emperor, or is it garbage? Is it nothing? It's hard to say exactly. And finally, I'll just mention the story about his gravesite, which I love a lot. The gravesite protected by this heavy door, but this gravesite that has no wall around it. What does it mean? I don't know, but I just like the image a lot. I think in America, we like hearing that there's no wall around that gravesite. It's open to all. It's democratic. You can get right there. Anybody can get that magic. No problem. But at the same time, maybe there's only one way through. Maybe the person who goes through those locks, who gets all those keys by looking around in the dark and opens that door, maybe they get a kind of magic unavailable to anyone who just wanders into that gravesite from the side. Who knows? I just love sitting with that image, and I invite you to sit with it for as long as it takes for you to get the magic from it. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you're able to support this podcast, please do so. That helps make it happen. If you're able to tell these stories to other people, do it. I tell you, spread them around. They're meant to be spread around like seeds in the fur of a deer. Please do so. If you want to get in touch, please do so at my website, jayleeming.com. And lastly, I'll just say I've got a Patreon thingamajig, and you can find me there. And thanks for listening to this podcast. And may these stories nourish you. May we all get blessed by that magic from visiting Nasruddin's gravesite, whether we go through the door or go around the side. Thanks very much. Take care.